I do want to talk about inflation and Roth IRA conversions. Um, so one of the big issues, and perhaps it was the reason why President Trump won the election, was a lot of taxpayers and a lot of IRA owners and a lot of folks thought, hey, I'm really getting clobbered with inflation. We think President Trump is going to do a better job reducing or bringing down inflation than Kamala Harris. So why don't we take a look to see what if that's really the case, and if there is going to be an inflation, what that will look like. So many financial experts would argue that global economic forces are more impactful than what a president can do. I might fall in that camp. But let's take a look at some of the actions that President Trump is taking and proposing, and let's see what some of the experts are predicting in terms of what the impact of some of those actions are going to be. One of the things that likely increases inflation are deficits. Well, if we're talking about continued tax cuts and even proposed new tax cuts, certainly our deficit, which is already high, is going to grow, which is a factor for increasing inflation. The other big area that will likely increase inflation are tariffs. Tariffs have traditionally raised prices for goods and services, and that is actually already happening and will happen even more in the immediate future. That will likely, in and of itself, increase inflation. If we have these continued low tax cuts or low tax rates, that again increases the chances of inflation. The immigration policies that will reduce the labor availability, making the cost of labor higher, that will again increase inflation. So we have some major tax cuts, or I'm sorry, some major action points by executive decision and supported by a Republican Congress that will likely increase inflation. Now, to be fair, we have some things that will likely decrease inflation. Perhaps the proposed federal spending tax reductions in a lot of the areas of, let's say, some of the, we're talking about massive layoffs and reduction in the federal tax force, reduced regulation, increase in domestic energy production. All those factors would decrease the inflation amount. I personally fear that the factors that would increase the inflation, as well as world events, are more likely and more impactful than the factors that would decrease inflation. But whatever you think, what I do want to do is I want to go through what is not necessarily intuitive, but what would happen for Roth IRA conversion planning if there is a significant inflation. So I want to do the math on inflation and Roth IRA conversion. So let's assume for discussion's sake, and here's the really interesting point that a lot of people don't get. If inflation was uniform, let's just say there was a 20% inflation factor, okay? So measured in purchasing power, everything goes down by exactly 20%. Let's do the math on inflation and Roth IRA conversions in the short term. All right, so remember before I said, okay, you have $24,000 in after-tax dollars, you have $100,000 in IRAs, and your purchasing power, you allowing for a 24% tax hit on the IRAs was 24%, you would have measured in purchasing power $100,000. All right. So if you didn't do the Roth conversion, but you had a 20% inflation hit, what would the purchasing power after inflation be? Well, I just knocked off 20% on each number, and I came up with purchasing power of inflation of $80,000. Well, again, let's say that you have the $24,000, which I'm going to reduce to $19,200 after inflation. And then you had $80,000, which was the value of the IRA, but I'm going to reduce that to $80,000. Now I'm going to make a Roth IRA conversion. So now I'm going to take the 19.2 to pay the tax on the Roth IRA conversion. And guess what? We have $80,000 of purchasing power after inflation, meaning that we break even. So if inflation was uniform, inflation should not have an impact on Roth IRA conversions. And by the way, I go through this in the book also because for many of you, this is a new concept, but it's not that simple. I wish it was. Because inflation isn't uniform. You know, sometimes certain goods and services like computers, you're not having tax cost increases, you're having tax cost decreases. But with some goods and services, particularly those that might be typically imported, there might be a higher cost. The other thing is, what if, for example, your tax bracket might go down, which might make it less favorable to convert? Or what about Medicare Part B? Maybe it would make it more favorable to convert. So I wish it was an easy rule of thumb, but each person's situation is unique, and the things that they spend money on is often unique. So I can't make a generalization, oh, you're going to be hit with inflation, so therefore you should make a bigger conversion, or you're going to be hit with inflation and therefore you should make a smaller conversion, because if inflation was uniform, it shouldn't be a factor, but it's not uniform. So what are you spending money on? And that would determine what would make more sense, whether you should do a conversion or not. And that's a little bit tricky to get, but it's actually important. And I happen to think that we are going to get hit with inflation, and maybe even higher than in the past. If you're one of those who think that it's not going to happen, then maybe you don't have to take that into consideration, and particularly what you are spending money on. Or in the case of many of my clients, that you're not a big spender. And we're going to also talk about that during the second session. And we're going to also talk about that in the third session, which is, I'll give you a little preview, which is planning to die with a lot of money is a really lousy plan. But I'm jumping ahead.